And one thing I didn't get to do on the show was actually hit somebody with it. So, just...
Hello?
Yeah, Dave, you know, this whole getting me tased thing between you and Jeff, it was just not cool, man. Not cool at all.
Wimp, what are you gonna do about it?
What am I gonna do about it? What? I'm coming out there and I'm gonna go all Van Helsing on you.
Wait, you're gonna do... What? Hello?
Today's project, Mechanical Mashup, is extremely dangerous. This thing can hurt, maim, and kill. And it might not even hurt, maim, and kill the person you're pointing it at. If this cable goes, or anything goes wrong with the trigger mechanism, it can hurt and kill you. This is an extremely important thing to keep in mind. Don't do this unless you are experienced in firearms and you're an experienced metal worker.
First, print out the plans. You will find 11 by 17 PDFs on the site you can download. You can also find the original plans at the URL below. Cut out the handle from the print and glue to the top of the wood. Laminate 2 layers of birch plywood together using epoxy glue or a good carpenter's glue. Clamp and let it dry. The final piece should be a bit larger than the handle. Cut out the handle using a jigsaw. You can use a bandsaw if you have one. Lay the wood on a 3-inch piece of foam and you can cut the part without much thought of clamping or positioning of the piece. Clamp and drill out the section for the trigger mechanism. Use a piece of tape on the drill to gauge the depth you are drilling to. Use a wood chisel to knock out the remainder of the material after drilling. Get a 1-inch by 1/8-inch strap of metal. Cut and glue down the metal patterns. Contact cement works well for this. Center punch and drill out any holes for the axles, but do this one size under what is asked. You will drill these out to full size later. Also, drill out any round sections in the part. That will save you time when cutting out the outlines. This is where things get messy. Rough cut the metal parts using a handsaw and a Dremel with a cutoff wheel. For the trigger, leave lots of extra material when you cut it. Heat it up with a propane torch, in this case Ben used MAP gas as it burns much hotter, and forge a nice flat area for the trigger. You can get a rotary file for the Dremel to clean up the hard to get parts, but use a standard hand file for the rest as it is a bit faster.
We trace it with utility.
Cut out the caulking plate outline in the handle once you have traced the outline with the metal parts. Drill the holes for the rivets of the caulking handle. Put a nail that fits through the hole into the caulking plates and through the handle. Cut off the end about a 1/4 inch from the edge and use a ball peen hammer to beat the end down into a rivet head. Shape the handle once the cocking plates are attached using a sander or any carving tools you may have. Ben figured his shop was not nearly dusty enough and that his hay fever and asthma needed a workout, so he went to town on the sander. Spin the axles for the trigger mechanism out on a drill press. You could use a regular drill or even a lathe for this though if you have it. Mark out the location of the small and large diameters and file bolts, nails, or any steel you have down to the appropriate sizes. Ben used a 1/4 inch bolt, number 10, and number 8 nails for the axles. Rivet over the ends of one side of the trigger mechanism. Test assemble the trigger mechanism using a small spring you can buy at a hardware store, or the one Ben found in an old printer, and use a tie wrap heated and bent into shape as the trigger return spring. Make sure all things work like this before going on to the next step. Ben took an hour making minor adjustments with a file to get things working smoothly. Reassemble the trigger mech and rivet down the other side as well. Get a flat spring from an old truck hood at a scrapyard.
So, to take one of these springs and straighten it out is not as hard as you think. You place one of these points in the vise, take a fairly large wrench like this, put it in, and then basically you work it up to that point. Use this to lever, probably even do it by hand.
Now you need to grind down the bow, and when you do, you will heat up the piece. Do not let it overheat. Every so often, before the piece glows, quench it in water to keep the temper and springiness. Grind out the taper and the bowstring knocks. Swage a 1/16 inch metal cable 13 inches long. Use a bench vise to compress the spring against some blocks drilled into the bench and attach the bowstring. Make sure all things are tight and in place. Very carefully, and keep your face off to the side when you do this, draw the bowstring back into the trigger and engage it. You can make a cocking handle, but Ben can easily manage this by hand. Test fire the crossbow without any bolt in it. You can buy bolts from a sports store. You can make some using dowel, and lastly, you can just use a pencil. Make or buy your bolts and go outside and give the crossbow a test fire into a piece of foam. Now go out and go all Van Helsing on your friends.